Welcome back to our video series on scaling your AI startup in under 6 weeks. My name is Yanni. I'm a growth partner here at Thinkk. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Today, we're going to talk about more marketing. In other words, doing more than what you did when you originally just launched your company. We're going to talk about expanding into podcasts, using affiliates, talking about influencers, and also looking at what some brand partnerships might look like for you. But before we even get into that, make sure you understand the source of our credibility. The first one comes from my own experience, with over a decade of launching, running, advising, and investing in different firms. The second side is going to be Think's experience launching and growing over 45 different AI startups last year in 2024. And so everything that you're going to learn here is going to be a combination of both my own personal experience as well as the data-driven insights that we've gathered on the Think side of things. Before we even get into it, though, and before you even consider whether you want to go ahead and actually expand your marketing into different things, you do need to ask two questions. And both of these hinge on something we call retention. Retention is the single most important factor to building a profitable business. And if you want to go ahead and expand your marketing before you have any sort of customer retention, what you're going to find is that you're basically just pouring water into a leaky bucket. And no matter how much water you go ahead and pour in, it's never going to sit there and fill up. And so it's really important to get those two things right before you ever look at expanding your marketing efforts. The first thing you want to look at is your retention curve flat? In other words, when people sign up with you, do they actually stay with you or are they dropping off in 5, 10, 15 days? If they are dropping off, you need to fix your service first. You have to make sure that whatever you're doing makes sense because if you try to just expand whatever you're doing and that thing doesn't make sense, you're all of a sudden just going to end up with a lot of things that don't make sense. And so it's really important to operate on your unit economics. In other words, operate on the smallest size of your business, make sure the customers are sticking around, and then go ahead to look to expand your marketing. Second thing you want to understand is, do your customers actually need you? And this is a really good indication of product market fit. If you ask your customers the following question, how painful would it be if we took this away from you? And the answer is somewhere like a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5. At that point, you know that you have pretty good customer retention. You probably have pretty good product market fit. And now you can go ahead to actually look at scaling your marketing. But again, if you do not have good customer retention and your customers do not need you, please do not go ahead and scale your marketing. All you're going to be doing is pouring water into a leaky bucket. So once you've nailed your retention, it's pretty much time to go ahead and expand your marketing. And so let's look at one of the first ways you can do this. And that's with affiliate marketing. In other words, using affiliates to go ahead and market your product or your service or your offer. Think of affiliates as your own commission only sales force. And so these are people which go ahead and market your services for you. And then whenever somebody does actually go ahead and sell them, they basically get a tiny bit of commission on whatever that happens to be. And so there's a few things to remember when you go ahead and get an affiliate marketing program together. First one is it's really important to have really great materials, marketing materials that these people can go ahead and use to market your things. Because you can imagine that even if you had 100 affiliates and every single one of them was sitting there marketing your stuff, if you gave them really bad quality content to go ahead and market, you're not going to have any sort of follow through on the side of their audience and who might eventually become your customers. So it's really important to get really high quality banners and videos and posts and descriptions and all the other things that you need to help them do the job that they're trying to do. The second one comes down to additional resources like personalized tools and landing pages and dashboards and anything else that you can give these people to do a good job. Because remember that they can only do as good of a job as the materials that you go ahead and give them to do that work with. So it's really, really important. If you want to build a really tight knit group, you want to go ahead and build a community around your affiliates too. And so you can go ahead and do that with group chats and webinars and making sure that people really feel involved in the work that they're doing. This is important no matter what you're building, but it also applies when you're actually building an affiliate marketing program. Another thing you want to look at is tiered commissions. And so if you have something called super affiliates, this 1 or 2 or 3% of your affiliates that are driving like 30, 40, 50% of the sales, you may want to go ahead and actually give them a little bit higher commission for some of the work they're doing. This also helps create a great incentive structure. That means that people will naturally try to produce a little bit more. And when they do produce a little bit more, they're going to get rewarded for that. So that's a great thing too. Another thing you want to do is just make sure that these people understand that you are there for them, that you're there to support them, and that you're in constant communication with them because they don't want to feel like they're sitting there marketing a company or a business or a product that they can't even get a hold of. So that's no good. Another way to go ahead and expand your marketing outside of the affiliate side actually has to do with influencers. And we've all seen influencers online, probably on Instagram and Facebook at different places, going ahead and marketing other people's services. Sometimes affiliates can also be influencers, and influencers can also be affiliates, but they're not exactly the same thing. Typically, the way it works with an influencer is you might actually go ahead and pay somebody to just produce video content for you, something called UGC or user generated content. And they're typically going to be styling this in their own personal way, whatever feels right to them and their audience. But you can just think of influencers as people that have some sort of audience that they try to go ahead and influence, right? So they're going to go ahead and make content around your brand or your product or your service or your offer. And so there's a couple of things to remember here when you're actually getting involved in building an influencer marketing campaign. The first one is really important because most people, when they think about influencers, think, well, I want to go ahead and get Kylie Jenner. I want to go ahead and get Eminem. I want to go ahead and get, Conor McGregor or any of these people to go ahead and be an influencer for them. And in reality, it's just not all that necessary. And in fact, the people that have a ton of followers typically don't always have a lot of engagement. And so you want to make sure that you're actually valuing engagement over the follower count. This means that you want to look at likes. You want to look at whether people are commenting. You want to look at what those comments are to make sure they're not just bot generated. You want to see how many times people are sharing the content. And generally speaking, if they run influencer programs in the past, you want to see how well those have converted. And so remember, this is more than just about how many followers somebody has. Sure, there might be some sort of validity to that, but it's so much more than that. So you actually would go ahead and prefer something that we call micro influencers. So these accounts with like 5,000, maybe maximum up to 50,000, who have a much tighter knit community and a personal relationship with the people that they market to. Because actually, what it helps do is amplify the effect of that marketing messaging that they go ahead and put out. You also want to make sure that these influencers have more or less like free domain over the creatives that they create. This user generated content because they know their audience and they know what's going to convert for them. If you go ahead and get a bunch of influencers on board and you say, hey, I really want you to go ahead and style your videos like this and do all this other stuff, well, you're going to eventually miss the mark and it's not going to appeal to this target market that you're trying to actually market to. So make sure that you give them a lot of creative authority and give them the freedom to express themselves and be themselves. It's really important to go ahead and creating great content and great user generated content that you can then actually use even in your own stuff afterwards. You also want to go ahead and just make sure that you're building long-term relationships with these people. And so it's one thing to go ahead and say, hey, I want to do a 3 video pack with you guys. And that's really awesome. But it's another thing to say, hey, I want to go ahead and start here. And then when that ends up going well, I want to make sure that we do maybe 5 videos a month or 10 videos a month, because eventually your audience will recognize their face with the brand. And it's much, much easier to go ahead and in the same way that we value retention when it comes out of building a business, it's really good to have retention in your partnerships too. And so if you do find a great affiliate, if you do find a great influencer, make sure that you keep them around over time and build trust and build a great relationship with them so that even well into the future, they continue to market your business for you. One of our favorite forms of marketing actually comes down to partnership marketing. And so this is a little bit more of a sophisticated form of marketing and it requires a little bit of groundwork and handshakes. But at the end of the day, it's seriously impactful and it's so amazing and important. One of the things that you look at when you're going ahead and getting a partnership marketing campaign together is like, what does it mean to actually have a partnership? And what sort of businesses might actually be good partners for you? So the first thing to go ahead and look at is make sure that you actually have clear value for both parties, because there are a lot of partnerships that you as a founder will try to go ahead and get together, which for one reason or another actually do not benefit the other side, right? In other words, it might be seriously beneficial for you to go ahead and get like an amazing deal with the NBA or something, but ask yourself the question, does the NBA need this, right? Like, is this actually fundamentally important or would this advance the goals of the NBA? Because if it does not, you are not creating clear value for both parties. And if you do not create value for both parties, you are not going to be able to get some sort of deal together. So it's really important to make sure that you're not wasting your time, but actually finding people that could benefit from going ahead and partnering with you. You also want to make sure that whenever you do find some sort of partner, that you go beyond just finding somebody who's in your same space. In fact, what you want to try and do is target complementary products or services. Or in other words, two different businesses that could benefit from each other getting involved. One of the ways you could do this is if you own a yoga company. And if you own a yoga company, you might go ahead and partner with a company that makes yoga mats. And so as a result, every single person that signs up for, let's say, your yoga company can go ahead and get a free mat. And everybody that goes ahead and signs up or buys a free mat, or I'm sorry, buys a mat from the yoga mat producing company, can maybe get a little slip of paper in there that says, hey, why don't you go ahead and try out a free yoga class? The first one's on us. And so both businesses there actually create additional value for their audience in going ahead and partnering. Another one of the greatest partnerships that you see as of recent actually is ChatGPT and Apple's partnership. And so ChatGPT obviously benefits from like a massive distribution network and all the branding and the privacy and everything else that Apple is doing. And Apple definitely benefits because for whatever reason, they have absolutely sucked at creating any sort of AI over the last 3 years. I mean, what an absolute crap show. But again, you are going ahead and actually creating that sort of value for Apple's customers there. And so that's an example of another great partnership where they're not exactly competing products or services, but there's clearly value there for both parties. You also want to make sure that they share a similar demographic. And so it might be interesting to go ahead and partner with, let's say, a hospital. But if the people that are sitting there in the hospital are not your end user or not your end target market, it's just not going to make any sense to go ahead and partner with them. So you want to make sure that both companies actually share a very similar target market so that you can actually create value for them and that they might end up also being your customers down the road. It's also important to go ahead and just create some sort of objectives. In other words, create some things that you're going to track, create some things that you're going to aim towards. It's one thing to say, hey, let's go ahead and partner. It's another thing to say, okay, hey, let's partner with this goal in mind. And then let's go ahead and review this every 6 weeks or let's say on a monthly basis to make sure that we're actively working towards that goal. And if we're not, what sort of steps can we make, to make sure that we go ahead and actually achieve that initial thing that we set out to do? And again, regular reviews. So once you get those sort of partnerships together, just make sure that you're looking at this stuff over time. Another really great form of marketing, if you are looking to go ahead and expand your reach and get on more platforms and tell more people about yourself, is actually podcast marketing. And as you can tell, podcasts have become absolutely huge recently, and for good reason. But even though you think they're huge, you would actually be surprised how few podcasts there are out there. In fact, some of the most recent data that we've seen says there's somewhere around 4 or 5 million podcasts out there on the marketplace. Even though that might sound like a lot, take into consideration that there's somewhere like 1.1 billion different websites out there. And so going ahead and forming a podcast actually lets you get in front of a lot more audience than maybe going ahead and getting a website together. So this is really important. And one of the nice things about a podcast is it lets your audience get a really authentic feel for who you are and what you're doing, in the same way that you might get an authentic feel for who I am and what Thinkk does by watching videos like this. And so getting a great podcast together is fairly straightforward, but it does require a little bit of work. And so in order to be able to do that, let's cut through some of the steps by actually repurposing content. And so what you'll do is you'll take a look at maybe some of your existing blog material. Maybe you take a look at some of the videos that you've created. Maybe you take a look at some of the posts or some of the concepts that you talk about and go ahead and just repurpose that into a form where you're sitting there and actually doing the talking and potentially bringing other people on board. It's good to also interview experts, because what you do when you go ahead and get somebody else on board to your podcast is you make sure that you are actually going ahead and appealing to all of their audience, right? In the same way that you're appealing to all of yours. You create value for both audiences, and you actually go ahead and get to take advantage of their perceived authority and perceived expertise in the space. Because when you interview an expert, all of that authority actually reflects back on you. All the expertise actually reflects back on you. And so this is a great thing. The other thing is the flip side of it. So not only running your own podcast, but being open to being on other people's podcasts too. You can go ahead and just by getting on another podcast, get your message out to a whole bunch of people that have never heard of you before. And so this is a really amazing thing. If you need some sort of help with your marketing, with expanding your marketing, with getting a marketing strategy together, with expanding into new channels, with getting new customers, go ahead and book a one-on-one workshop with me. I think it's going to be a really, really amazing thing. And if you do want some sort of additional expertise and additional educational material at zero cost to you, completely for free, take a look somewhere around the bio or somewhere in the description here. And I'll leave a few links to additional reading that you can do to go ahead and advance your goals here, again, at zero additional cost. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much for just bopping on and learning about how to expand your marketing here for your AI startup. You learned about podcasts, you learned about affiliates, you learned about influencers, you learned about brand partnerships. And if you need anything else, you know how to get in touch with us. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.